Hi, everyone. This is William Davis, and I want to thank you for inviting me to present at Festive Tech 2025. Today, I want to talk with you a little bit about the subject of the DNA of leadership. And when I'm talking about the DNA of leadership, I'm talking specifically about building genuine relationships. This helps you to have great teams, but it also helps you to be better as a leader. Because when we talk about leadership, leadership first and foremost is human relationships, two people or more working together for a common cause. And as we go through our presentation today, I want you to be thinking about how you perform as a leader in the various scenarios that I talk about. But I also want you to think about how you've dealt with the worst leader in your career and also the best leader in your career. There's a story of a young lady who came to work for me. She was a good worker. I wouldn't say she was great, but she was always on time. She was always helpful, and she was a great teammate. But after about a year to a year and a half, she began coming in late. Now, at first, it was just every once in a while, but then it became several times a week. And the amount of time that she was late went from just a few minutes to hours. It started affecting her. It started affecting our team. And it started affecting the work that we needed to accomplish. I needed to do something about it. Now, I will share later in the presentation how that story ends. But I want you to think about, as a leader, how would you have dealt with this young lady and the situation that she was presenting you with at that particular time? How would the leaders that I asked you about earlier, the worst leader you've ever worked with, the best leader you ever worked with, how would they have handled this situation? Because some will deal with it as a boss. They focus on their authority, they focus on their control, and you're to come into compliance. And some people will focus on it from a perspective of a manager, more worried about the processes and the tasks and the checklists. But see, we're talking about leadership, and leaders are called to deal with situations at a higher standard. Why is this topic important? Well, in 2023, the World Economic Forum put out a statement after their yearly conference in Switzerland that says that the world has a leadership crisis. It didn't have anything to do with resources, is we were failing in leadership. And as you all know, leadership's at the heart of business success. The same year, the US News and World Report Harris poll came out. 86% of the respondents in America said that they were disappointed in leaders, regardless of the area of life we're talking about. 84 of them said that they are disappointed in government leadership and it's in crisis. And most importantly, as we talk today, this statistic that 78% of them saw a crisis in corporate America. This crisis reveals a very simple truth. People aren't disappointed. People don't leave companies or businesses. They leave because of a lack of leadership in their career. Now, how do we choose leaders in our society? Well, particularly in a corporate perspective, we often look at them from a tenure perspective. The one that's been there the longest is going to get the promotion. Some are able to move into a leadership role because they had success leading a project. And that's great. I mean, we need people who are able to lead projects effectively. But does that really make them a leader of people? And does it really make them a leader able to have long-term success? And then you have the one that we all have dealt with at some point in our careers, that nepotism that comes into play, where someone knows someone, or someone's related to someone, or someone is just good enough at schmoozing up to the folks so that they get that particular promotion. Is that really the way that we should be choosing our leaders? See, most leaders, particularly in the tech industry, have the technical qualifications for the job that you're asking them to do. But that's not what where we're failing. We're failing in relationships and their inability to deal with relationships effectively are what disqualify them. See, leadership is the intentional practice of building genuine relationships. This includes displaying sincere empathy and inspiring people to become their best. And again, this goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning. Real leadership is and will always be about people. So again, leadership fails at the relationship level, not necessarily at the technical level or at the managerial level where I'm assigned and need to get tasks done. Now, in 38 years, I've had decades in corporate America. And what this experience revealed to me was one pattern in particular. Leadership succeeds or fails by how you treat people. And I was fortunate enough that in the way that I led my teams through 38 years, I had a 90+% retention rate. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with bragging, and I hope you don't take it that way. But what I want you to think about is leadership and how you proceed in leadership builds credibility or it kills credibility. See, I believe leadership is deceptively simple. It's simple because its foundation never changes. You treat your people with respect, you build genuine relationships, you listen to them, and I'm talking about really listening to them. You communicate clearly with them, and then you support your team. Because, see, again, we go back to this aspect that leadership is all about humans. You're dealing with people that have human emotions, that communicate differently, have different maturity levels, and these create complexity, not strategy. You see, leadership's hard, and it's hard because the people that you're dealing with are complex. So today, what I want to work with you on is how do we build genuine, real relationships? How do we exhibit sincere empathy? Because we're going to talk about the fact that many people think that empathy in leadership shows a sign of weakness. And I disagree. And also, how are you going to inspire, or how do you inspire and motivate your teams? Now, it's always funny when I do this presentation in person, I ask people in the audience, how many of you are in a relationship? And the first thing they think of is I'm trying to delve into their personal life, and I'm not. But how many of you have family? You're in a relationship. How many of you have friends? Well, if you have friends, you're in a relationship. See, all of us are in a relationship in some shape, form, or fashion in our lives. And we need to be able to deal with others in order to make those relationships successful. Because, see, relationships are not a luxury, they're not an optional extra that you can either choose to have or not have. They're woven into the very fabric of who we are as human beings. And our relationships are at the heart of our lives. But because they're at the heart of our lives does not mean that they are straightforward. And in fact, I would say to you that our relationships with other people are rarely straightforward. So, what I work with people on is how do you build these real relationships? Well, the first thing I tell them is you must want to be a leader to be a leader. What I mean by that is when you become a leader, it now is not about self. It's now about your team, about your folks. And when you have to have that focus in your life, you have to want to have your people successful. You can't be in a position of wanting to be a leader just for the title or just for the corner office or just for the bigger paycheck or just the fact that you want to be a boss. See, when we talk about being a leader is the job because leadership requires dedication. It requires continuous learning, not just on your part, but on your team's part in order for them to grow the way you desire for them to grow. It requires empathy. And we'll talk about empathy in a few minutes. And then it involves communication skills, not just me being able to communicate to them a message, but me being able to listen correctly and effectively to the message that they are giving to me. And then you must also be able to meet people where they are comfortable in letting you know who they are. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Well, let's talk about comfortable here. This is my dog. This was her comfort zone every day for the 10 years that I had her. In that chair, relaxed, cozy, and communicating with me with those eyes. You see, you have to be able to meet people where they are comfortable in communicating with you and letting you know who they are. It never works for me to bring someone into my office or bring them into the boardroom and say, hey, let's get to know each other. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? Because you see, when you do that, they still have this perception of you being a boss and them being an underling. And they're at a disadvantage. I'll give you a couple of examples in my career. I had a young man who came to work for me, very, very funny kid, very outgoing, but he was very, very nervous, always worried about the fact that he was going to get in trouble, or he was going to get fired. I needed to be able to get him comfortable in his role, get him comfortable in establishing a relationship with me so he could also establish a relationship with the rest of the team. So I just finally asked him one day, I said, what do you like doing when you're not in the office? And he thought about it for a second. He says, you know what? I like to golf. Well, this was 30 years ago, so I still golfed at that time. And I said, okay, tomorrow you and I are going to take the afternoon off and we're just going to go golf. Just the two of us. And after he got over the initial shock of that, he was like, oh, okay, that's great. Well, when we got to the golf course the next day, I had him drive the cart, and the first 3 or 4 holes were very, very stiff, very, very stressful because, again, he wasn't comfortable. I got up to hit a tee shot, and I hit an absolute horrendous tee shot. It went so far out in the woods, I don't know that they ever found the ball. And I just looked at him and I said, I want you to know I did that just because I wanted you to feel better about your golf game. You know, before I said that, I could see in his face, he was thinking, okay, this was a really bad shot. How's this guy going to react? Because we all know people that take themselves so seriously that, might break their club or start cursing or screaming or ranting and raving or getting upset. But when I did that, it helped him see, you know what? This is just a person. This person wants to be here establishing a relationship with me. This isn't forced. What's the word? It was genuine. And he saw that. And from that moment on, the remainder of that day, and through the remainder of the time that he had his career under me, we had a great relationship. And you would have thought we'd known each other for 20 years. It allowed him to relax because he now knew I was invested in his success. It wasn't a fake thing. I was true. I was genuine. I also had a young lady that came to work to me for me that was in the opposite situation. She had a great interview. I was so impressed with her, and I knew she could do the job that I was asking her to come to work for me to do. But very soon after she came to work for me, I started getting all these little notes from her, either instant messages or emails saying, "Is this okay? Is this okay? Is this okay? Can I do this?" And so much to the point that everything that she was doing, regardless of how big or how small, she was asking permission. And I'm like, okay, this surprises me first because that's not how I would have perceived her in the interview. And so I just went to her and she likes to walk every day at lunch. And so I just went up to her and I said, "Do you mind if I go walking with you one day at lunch?" And she, "Oh, no, that's fine." So we went around walking. We had the lake at this complex that we worked at. So we went around two or three times. And as we came to the end, I think the third lap, I said to her, "Okay, help me understand why you're always asking for my approval." And she looked at me and tears started rolling down her face. And I'm like, first of all, that's not the reaction I was expecting. But what she came to tell me was that the individual that she had first gone to work for out of college was so controlling, was such a micromanager that everything that she did, it didn't matter how small it was, he demanded his approval before she could send it out or before she could take action. I just told her, I said, "Look, that's not me. I hired you because I trust you. I hired you because I know that you can do the job. Now, if you have questions, if you have concerns, you have clarification that you need, please come to me. I mean, we'll work and we'll talk about it. But I'm not going to sit there and look over your shoulder and make sure you're doing something the way I would do it or the way I would want it done." Because, see, that's not what leaders do. Leaders empower their people. In order for me to make that connection with the two people that I just told you about, I had to find something that made them comfortable to where they would open up to me. Each of your people, you need to be able to do that with because one solution does not work for everybody. This is not a one size fits all situation. But once you do that with each individual and you understand how they operate, what concerns them, things that might be going on in their work life or even outside of work, you're now able to frame your relationship with them, but then you're also able to frame your relationship with your team as a whole to where they're able to work and operate effectively. It's an incredible experience. But I promise you, the time investment that you make in getting to really know your people and really establishing a relationship with them will never fail you. It provides dividends that you will see very quickly. What about genuine empathy? You have to be able to establish or have genuine empathy. It can't be fake. People will see through fakeness quicker than anything that you do. And once they think you're a fake, it is an incredibly difficult road to try to get past that and bring them to an understanding that you're truly genuine. When we talk about empathy, empathy is this ability to understand what someone is feeling. Not telling you that you need to be able to solve the problem for them, but you need to understand that what they're going through, what they're feeling, is real and is important to them. You have to see that situation from their perspective and respond in a way that shows genuine care and respect. The way that you do that is first, you have to develop a self awareness, understanding that understanding is key to recognizing and relating to others' feelings. You have to be able to listen to what they're telling you. You can't go in with preconceived notions. You can't go in with a thought process that, oh, this is silly. Well, it may seem silly to you, but guess what? It's not silly to them. And in listening, genuinely listening to them, and I mean focusing to what they're telling you without interrupting, without darting your eyes all over the room, you have to maintain eye contact with them so that they again understand that you're listening to what they're saying. You do that by, you help them understand that by paraphrasing what they say to you to show that you've understood. And if you haven't understood, that is a perfect time for clarification to be brought to the forefront. You see, empathy grows when paired with a genuine desire to help others. And that genuine desire starts with them knowing that you're listening to what they're saying. You have to nurture a sense of care and responsibility toward others. Because let's be honest, you can't look at your relationship with people just from a perspective of being in the office. They have financial challenges, they may have health challenges, they may have family challenges. Those are all things that help frame not only who they are, but their day to day existence. Now, obviously, there's a very fine line that you have to make sure you don't want to cross, or you make sure you don't cross in order to get too personally involved. But you, as a leader, even if it's just hooking them up with maybe HR or some resource expert within your company that can help them deal with that situation, you need to do that. Because again, based upon what they're going through, they may not be thinking about your company being able to help them or what resources might be at their disposal. How do you inspire and motivate your team? Well, first of all, I will tell you that you need to understand your team is not your competition. How many times have you dealt with a leader that when you start to have success, they either jump in and start claiming, credit for what you're doing or want to make sure that they're right there in the limelight with you? See, your team's not your competition. You have to focus on the fact that their success is a reflection of you. And as I look back on my 38-year career, I look at all of the individuals that I led. Some of them bypassed me, and I was happy for them. Why? Because that showed that I had given them the ability and empowered them to reach the goals that they wanted. And guys, at the end of the day, that's what we're about as leaders. Are people being successful? Their success elevates you, but your ego can destroy them. You also have to be able to empower them through trust. Again, as I went back to that young lady that I talked about a minute ago that had been micromanaged to the point of tears. It took a little while for her to get used to me as the leader who was totally opposite of the person she'd been with before. But once she understood that I was true and that the first time that she didn't do something the way I would have done it, I didn't come down on her, her ability, her, for lack of a better word, her confidence grew unbelievably. Because why? She knew that I trusted her and that empowered her. When you inspire and motivate your team, you have to do it through recognizing and celebrating success. And when we talk about recognizing and celebrating success, can I encourage you that it's not just the end of a project or it's not just the end of an assignment that you can recognize and celebrate? You have milestones all through work that you do. Some of it's very difficult, particularly from a technology perspective. Celebrate the little successes. Technology is changing in such a fashion that you come in one day and it's one thing, and tomorrow it may be something totally different. You have to keep up. You have to learn. Celebrate the successes that you have when you have them. And you also have to invest in your team's growth. Professional development, continuous learning, help your people be encouraged to learn. Don't act like it's an inconvenience. Oh, don't do that because it'll take away from what you're doing. You don't know that what they're doing to develop and learn isn't going to be a tremendous asset to you on either the work you're doing now or somewhere down the road. What about the young lady that I mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation? I knew I had to do something because of the detrimental effect that it was having on not just the team and our work, but I could see it was on her also. It bothered her. She had a habit of going down and getting coffee every morning when she came into the office. And so I just came up to her one day and I said, "Hey, you're going to go down and get coffee?" And she goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And I said, "Okay, you mind if I go with you?" She's like, "No, no." So we went down and I bought her coffee and I sat down at the table and she joined me and I just looked at her and I said, "Tell me what's going on." Wasn't accusatory. I wasn't demanding, but I just wanted to know what's going on. And she took it the right way because of the relationship that I'd already established with her, the way I'd already dealt with her in her period of time that she worked for me. So she knew when I was coming to her, I was sincere. And again, the tears fell. And what I came to find out was she was dealing with a parent in hospice. How would you have dealt with that situation? How would the best leader you've ever worked for have dealt with that situation? And then how would the worst leader you've ever worked with dealt with that situation? You see, if you take nothing out of this presentation, I want you to remember one thing. Leadership will always be about people. We can talk about technology, we can talk about AI, we can talk about any number of things. But at the end of the day, leadership is about how successful you are in dealing with your people. building that genuine relationship to where they can feel comfortable with you, knowing that you're genuine, that you are invested in them, and you actually care about them as more than being just a number or an asset to the organization. You care about them as a person. So the call to action today is very simply this: be the leader that people brag about, not the leader that they survive. It starts with, what is it like to be led by you? If you were led by you, what would you think? Are you somebody that you would brag about? Or are you somebody that you would dread and just have to survive? Look at your daily relational behaviors. See, your leadership legacy begins with the relationships you build today and how you build them. And not only does it make a difference in their career, but can I tell you that it makes a difference in yours? Because when you deal with your people in a genuine fashion, you care about them, you're invested in them, they will move mountains for you. I know. I had a 90+% retention rate. It's because my people cared about me, cared about each other, cared about the work that we were doing, and knew that it was reciprocated. See, I would never let anybody throw each other under the bus. We won together, we lost together. And when there was a hit to be taken, I'm the one that took it because I was the leader of that team. And that allowed them to work in such a fashion that creativity was spawned. Chances may have actually been taken. And even if we failed, guess what? Everything we did was fixable. We learned and we moved on. Folks, that's the type of leader that people want. That's the type of leader that people will stick with. I appreciate your attention today. Would love your feedback. Agree, disagree. Tell me about situations that you had that fall into these categories. And here I've left you a QR code for both my website and I've written 2 books. They're both on Amazon. I would love for you to be able to read them and give me your feedback on what you thought about those thoughts that I put in those books. Have a great December. Have a wonderful holiday, and thank you for letting me share with you.